What if the first war in heaven, the one described in the book of Revelation, was not just a distant vision or a poetic allegory, but the living memory of a real cosmic battle? A battle fought before the earth was formed, before Adam took his first breath, before time, as we know it, began. What if this war raged not in one place, but across countless worlds and dimensions, and the victors and the vanquished are still among us today, hidden in plain sight? And what if the scars of that ancient conflict are etched into our very souls, influencing the rise and fall of nations, the conflicts we see on the news, and even the hidden struggles inside our own hearts? If questions like these stir something inside you, if you want to go deeper into the mysteries of the Bible, uncover the hidden connections between prophecy, history, and the world we live in today, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Like this video so more people can discover it. Share it with someone who loves the truth. And join the conversation in the comments. Your thoughts may unlock a part of the mystery we are about to explore together. Revelation 12:7-9 tells us, "And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not." For centuries, theologians have debated whether these verses speak of a symbolic struggle or an actual event. But what if the answer is both? A divine conflict whose shockwaves reached our very DNA. According to accounts passed down in both scripture and certain extra-biblical traditions, there was a time, nearly 5 billion years ago, when creation itself was still young. In the constellation we now call Orion, a war of unimaginable scale erupted. Not in one world, but across multiple dimensions at once. It was a conflict so vast, so far-reaching, that every soul currently incarnated on Earth may carry its memory, buried deep in the spirit. The story begins not with humanity, but with beings of staggering power and beauty, the ones Scripture calls angels, though the truth of their nature may be far greater than our words can contain. Among them was one who shone brighter than the morning star, Lucifer. Once entrusted with authority by the Creator, he would one day lead a third of the heavenly host into rebellion. The Bible records his fall. History remembers the devastation. Yet in this telling, the fallen angels were not mere poetic symbols. They were conscious, ruling intelligences from higher planes of existence, beings capable of shaping worlds. Their rebellion was not just against God's authority, but against the very balance of creation. And those we now call demons were, and perhaps still are, the reptilian adversaries of humankind, ancient rivals whose enmity toward us is older than the earth itself. They walk among us now, not always in form we can see, but in the unseen realms, bound to the same long chain of cause and effect that has kept our souls entangled for eons. The Orion War, as some sources name it, may be the key to understanding why Earth has become a place of trials, of tests, and of refining fires. For the Bible tells us we are strangers and pilgrims here. 1 Peter 2:11. Perhaps that is truer than we realize. This world may not be our first home, nor our final one. And if the origins of the conflict lie in a cosmic rebellion, then the path to peace lies not in forgetting, but in remembering. In this journey, we will search the scriptures and the records of the ancients, comparing prophecy with history, to uncover what happened and why it still matters. Before there was war, there was order. Not the cold stillness of lifeless space, but a harmony alive with purpose. A design so intricate that the smallest detail echoed the glory of its creator. Spiritual writings outside the canon describe a vast council of 12, beings so elevated in wisdom and power that to our eyes they would seem like gods. And yet, they themselves bowed before the one who is above all, the prime creator. This image finds an echo in Revelation 4, where John saw 24 elders surrounding the throne, clothed in white, crowned with gold, falling before him who lives forever and ever. If heaven has elders, rulers, and order, perhaps these councils are not mere symbols, but realities of divine governance. Our universe, in this account, was the seventh to be formed. 6 others had existed before, each a masterpiece, each governed by the laws of the Creator, each with beings shaped to reflect His wisdom. But the 7th would be different. Into this one, a unique law was woven, total and unguarded free will. Up to this point, creation had been like a vast orchestra following the score of the composer. Notes were played as written, harmonies unbroken. But now the composer set aside the conductor's baton, allowing the musicians to choose their own melody. No guardian would stand to enforce the original design. No predestined path would bind the will. Beings could choose their own way, to walk in the light or to turn toward the shadow. 2 races were brought into existence within this balance, humans and reptilians, not as enemies, but as equals, mirrors to one another, embodying different aspects of the Creator's image. Humanity was endowed with adaptability, empathy, and the hunger to explore. The reptilian race carried discipline, strategic intellect, and unyielding perseverance. Each race would reflect and refine the other, sharpening virtues through contrast, learning cooperation as the highest form of wisdom. This balance is not foreign to the Bible. It appears in the story of Cain and Abel, 2 brothers, each bearing gifts before God, yet divided by jealousy. It appears in Jacob and Esau, twin sons with different destinies, locked in a struggle that would shape nations. Even in the parable of the wheat and the tares, Matthew 13, both grow together until the appointed time. Light and shadow, mercy and justice, spirit and flesh. It was into this delicate balance that the council made their appointment. From among the highest of the angels, one was chosen to oversee this new creation cell, Lucifer. His name, meaning light-bearer, was not just a title, it was a mission. Isaiah 14:12 calls him Son of the Morning, a being of splendor and brilliance. His was an opportunity to rise even higher through service and responsibility. But authority is a crucible. Given the freedom to shape the destiny of this universe, Lucifer made a choice that would shatter the balance. He rejected the original harmony of light and shadow. In his reasoning, evil, or what we call evil, was not a flaw to be resisted, but a tool to be amplified. Pain, he believed, teaches through experience what wisdom cannot teach through words. By tilting the scales toward darkness, he thought he could accelerate the spiritual evolution of both races. The Bible hints at such arrogance in Ezekiel 28, where the anointed cherub becomes lifted up in pride because of his beauty, corrupted by his own wisdom. This was not rebellion in a single instant. It began as a small shift, an adjustment of design, justified by what seemed to be good intentions. But in altering the balance, Lucifer sowed seeds of chaos that would one day engulf worlds. In the beginning, the effects were subtle. The reptilian race, once equal partners in growth, began to see dominance as the highest virtue. Humanity, created to adapt and connect, began to mirror suspicion and fear. Coexistence became rivalry. Rivalry became competition. Competition turned to enmity. Some theologians have suggested that free will is the greatest gift and the greatest risk God could bestow. For without it, love is not truly love, only obedience. But with it comes the possibility of rejecting love altogether. Lucifer's decision was a test of this principle on the grandest scale. Could creation survive when the light-bearer himself began to dim the light? As the imbalance grew, the council did not immediately intervene. This, too, was part of the experiment. The law of free will had to run its course, and so they watched as both races advanced in technology, philosophy, and art, but also in pride, greed, and the lust for power. The day would come when the restraint of wisdom would be broken, and the hands that built civilizations would forge weapons that could destroy them. For now, Lucifer still walked among the stars as a ruler appointed, not yet as a rebel cast out. To the humans, he was a guiding light, teaching skills, inspiring great monuments, whispering ideas that stretched the mind. To the reptilians, he was a figure of authority, urging them to reach beyond their limits, to become masters of strategy and control. But beneath it all was the subtle thread of division, an invisible fissure spreading across the foundation of creation. And in the halls of eternity, where the council's light shone beyond the reach of shadow, there was silence. The prime creator, who could have ended the experiment with a single word, allowed it to unfold. The lesson of free will would not be learned in theory, but in the searing fires of consequence. It is here that we begin to see the first tremors of what would become the Orion War. Two races, each with gifts meant to complement, now locked in a slow spiral toward mistrust. A leader, brilliant beyond measure, convinced he knew a faster way to bring perfection, even if that way led through darkness. Was this arrogance? Was it zeal without wisdom? Or was it the inevitable result of granting perfect freedom to imperfect beings? The scriptures give us glimpses, but they do not answer every question. Perhaps that is intentional, for these are not only ancient mysteries, but present ones. We, too, live in a world where the gift of choice is a double-edged sword. We can build or we can destroy. We can forgive or we can hate. We can walk toward the light or we can turn away. The stage was set, the balance was broken, and somewhere in the constellation we now call Orion, the first sparks of a war began to glow. Faint at first, but destined to burn like a supernova. The first shot was not fired in rage, but in cold calculation. On the planet Tiamat, a jewel in the constellation Orion, two civilizations stood at the height of their glory. Its skies shimmered with the flight of crystal-winged ships. Its oceans mirrored towers of light that pierced the clouds. The air hummed with the sound of creation, not just machines, but the very pulse of life at its zenith. Humans and reptilians had walked here for centuries under an uneasy truce. Trade routes spanned continents, embassies exchanged gifts, and even the arts bore the blended fingerprints of both races. But peace, as it so often does, had become a fragile glass, beautiful, but one blow away from shattering. That blow came when whispers began to spread, whispers of secret weapons, of fleets assembled in the dark, of alliances formed in the shadows. History rarely remembers the first casualty. It remembers the moment silence breaks. When the first city fell, it was as if the universe held its breath. Tiamat's nights lit up with fire, not from the stars, but from detonations that tore across its surface. Massive energy cannons split mountains in half. Seas boiled under the impact of orbital strikes. Whole forests, vast enough to be seen from orbit, were vaporized in seconds. The smell of scorched earth rose into the thin upper atmosphere, a scent that even the angels in the highest realms could not ignore. Reptilian war cruisers, sleek and black, like predatory shadows, moved through the void with disciplined precision. Human fleets, their hulls gleaming in silver and gold, countered with speed and ingenuity, darting between asteroid fields to strike supply lines. The war was not just fought on the ground or in space. It was fought in the mind. Saboteurs infiltrated command centers, turning brother against brother, leader against council. I can almost see it. And perhaps you can too. The panic in the eyes of civilians as the sky split open above their cities. The defiance in the stance of warriors who knew they would not live to see another sunrise. The prophets might have called this the stars falling from heaven, Matthew 24:29. And in truth, it was not far from that. Entire colonies vanished in explosions, so bright they rivaled the sun. Even the great suns of the Orion arm began to destabilize under the violent ripple of weapons beyond comprehension. One by one, planets fell, their surfaces cracked, their atmospheres ripped away, their life extinguished. And then came the number that still haunts the record: 137 trillion souls. Not bodies, souls erased from the order of creation in the span of the war's fury. Their cries reverberated through the spiritual planes, a wail so deep it reached the councils that govern eternity. Lucifer, watching from his throne in the high orbit stations, began to see the truth. The experiment he had tilted toward darkness was no longer a controlled trial. It was a wildfire burning through the fabric of reality. But by the time the gravity of his choice pressed upon him, it was too late. The reptilians were too far committed. Humanity was too deeply wounded. Tiamat had become the bleeding heart of the galaxy, and the blood was staining every star. And this is where the Bible's vision collides with the extra-biblical account. For the scriptures speak of Michael, the archangel, the one who leads heaven's armies. Revelation 12:7 declares, "And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon." In that moment of cosmic crisis, Michael broke the law of neutrality. He descended into this universe, our cell of creation, with an army of light that dwarfed even the greatest fleets of Tiamat. Imagine it. Ships not forged of metal, but of living light, moving without engines, propelled by will and the breath of the Creator. Warriors clad in armor that shone like molten gold, their faces unshaken by the darkness before them. They did not come to negotiate. They came to end the slaughter. The clash was beyond anything our minds can contain. Where Michael's forces struck, the very physics of war bent. Weapons meant to destroy stars fizzled against the shield of divine command. Reptilian dreadnoughts were shattered not by missiles, but by the weight of glory. And through it all, Michael's voice rolled like thunder. Judgment had come. Lucifer fought, not with the desperation of a coward, but with the fury of one who still believed his cause was just. Beside him, his second in command, the one we know as Satan, unleashed every weapon at his disposal. The void between the stars became a furnace. The constellation Orion became a wound in the heavens. But even the brightest torch cannot outshine the sun. Piece by piece, their fleets fell. Fortress worlds were breached. Command hubs went silent. At last, Lucifer himself was seized, not in humiliation, but in the grim silence of inevitability. His rebellion had run its course. The war was over, but the sentence had yet to be passed. And when it came, it would not just change the fate of the rebels. It would change the fate of every soul in this universe, including ours. The war had ended, but the ruins it left behind were not just shattered planets and burned-out suns. They were wounded spirits, fractured by their own choices. Creation itself seemed to hold its breath. What would be done with the victors turned oppressors, and the victims who had become executioners in their own right? The Council of 12, those luminous rulers of the universes, gathered in solemn assembly. In their presence, time has no meaning. Moments are weighed not by seconds, but by the weight of eternity. Before them stood the leaders of the rebellion, chained not by metal, but by the authority of divine law. Lucifer, the once light-bearer, now bore the shadow of his own decisions. At his side, his lieutenant, the adversary, the one the scriptures would later call Satan, the accuser of our brethren. Revelation 12:10. The verdict was unlike any passed before. They would not be destroyed, for destruction would only release them without remedy. Instead, they would be confined, not to a single dungeon, but to 37 worlds scattered across the vastness of creation. Each world would act as a prison, not for bodies alone, but for the fragments of their very souls, divided according to their vibrational nature. And among these 37, one was chosen with a role unlike any other. A young planet rich with oceans and mountains, still forming its rivers and breathing its first winds, a world distant from Orion's scars, yet close enough to feel the echo of its grief. A world that, in the fullness of time, would be called Earth. The scriptures hint at this strange destiny. In Isaiah 45-18, we are told, God himself formed the earth. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. But what if part of that habitation was not for a perfect humanity in a perfect garden, at least not yet, but for a wounded race, sent here to learn the hardest lesson of all? In the councils above, the earth was approached, not as an object, but as a conscious being, a living creation in her own right. And she agreed. To shelter these exiles would be to take on their storms, their wars, their violence. It would mean hosting millennia of struggle. Yet she accepted, becoming what could only be described as a maximum security spiritual prison. Here, free will would still exist, but bound by a new law, the law of cause and effect. Galatians 6-7 declares it simply, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. On earth, no deed would be without consequence, no choice without its echo. Those who had once wielded power without restraint would now live and die alongside those they had once despised, returning again and again through the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Think of it. Souls that once commanded fleets, now born into frail human bodies, feeling hunger, pain, fear. Souls that once saw themselves as superior, now helpless infants in the arms of those they once scorned. Century after century, the two races, human and reptilian in essence, if not always in form, would meet in the marketplace, in the battlefield, in the home, each life another step toward understanding, or another stumble back into hate. And this perhaps explains something we rarely consider. Why is human history so marked by cycles of violence, conquest, and revenge? Why does peace, when it comes, feel so fragile, so easily shattered? Could it be because we are not only shaping our future, we are still untangling the knots of an ancient war? But the Council did not abandon them to their fate. From the beginning, watchers were assigned, angelic guardians who would nudge, whisper, and at times intervene to prevent catastrophe. Prophets would be sent, men and women, through whom the Creator's voice could be heard in moments of crisis. Scripture itself would have become a compass, a reminder that even in exile, the way home had not been erased. And then came the decision that would change everything. One of the 12 creators, being so high in authority that even Lucifer, at his peak, could not rival them, stepped forward. He would not merely send messages. He would not simply watch from the throne. He would enter this prison himself. The Bible speaks of this mystery in John 1:14. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. This was not just the arrival of a prophet. This was the unthinkable, that a divine being of unimaginable glory would descend through layer after layer of reality, condensing his essence until he could inhabit the frail body of a man. This was Jesus, not merely the rabbi from Nazareth, not merely the carpenter's son, but the Logos, the living Word, the one through whom all things were made. John 1:3. At his baptism in the Jordan, when the heavens opened and the Spirit descended like a dove, the Christ consciousness, the fullness of divine authority, entered into the man we know as Jesus of Nazareth. Lucifer, imprisoned on earth in his own cycle of limitation, did not recognize him at first. It is almost ironic. The great strategist, the one who could read the currents of power, did not see that the one walking the dusty roads of Galilee was of the very council that had once commissioned him. When he confronted Jesus in the wilderness, tempting him with food, with power, with kingdoms, he was speaking to one of the architects of creation itself. And he did not know it. Jesus' mission was not to overthrow Rome, nor to lead armies against the reptilian powers still at work in the shadows. His mission was far more dangerous, to show that the only way out of this prison was not through conquest, but through love. To teach that the enemy you destroy in battle will rise again in another form, but the enemy you forgive loses all power over you. It was, and still is, the hardest lesson for the exiles of the Orion War to learn, for we have been trained by ages of conflict to see victory in domination. But Jesus said in Matthew 5:44, "Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you." These are not gentle suggestions. They are the keys to the cell. And so, the story of Earth as a prison is not one of despair, but of opportunity. Yes, it is a place of trials. Yes, we are surrounded by conflict. But every act of mercy, every moment of forgiveness, every choice to walk in truth, these are the chisels breaking the locks. Look around our world today, and you can still see the patterns. Wars sparked by pride, nations divided by ideology, communities fractured by suspicion. They may wear the faces of modern politics or cultural disputes, but the root is ancient. It is the echo of Tiamat, the unfinished business of souls still learning what it means to truly be free. And here is the hidden grace. The very planet that holds us is also healing us. The earth, in her patience, receives our tears and our blood alike, turning them into the soil that grows new life. The mountains we climb teach perseverance. The seas we cross teach courage. The storms we endure teach resilience. She is our prison, yes, but also our teacher. One day, the council's decree will be fulfilled. The prison will not last forever. The scriptures promise a time when there will be a new heaven and a new earth. Revelation 21:1. But until then, the gates will not swing open for those still carrying the weapons of the old war in their hearts. This is why Jesus came, not to remove the law of cause and effect, but to fulfill it with grace, to pay a debt we could never repay, so that when we finally lay down our arms, not only against others, but against God Himself, the path home will be clear, and perhaps even Lucifer will face that choice. The same key that turns our lock could turn his. Whether he takes it or not is a mystery yet to unfold. But for you and me, the choice is now. Will we keep living as if the old war is still raging? Or will we walk the narrow road that leads out of the gates? The echoes of Orion are still in us, but so is the voice of the one who came to set the captives free. The gates of this prison are not sealed by steel or stone. They are locked by something far more subtle, the chains we carry within ourselves. And the strange truth is, those chains have never been beyond our power to break. Lucifer's rebellion was born out of pride, but it was fueled by a belief, the belief that pain could refine faster than love. That belief still stalks our world today. You can see it in the way leaders justify cruelty for the greater good. You can hear it in the rhetoric of those who say peace can only come through force. You can feel it in your own heart, in the moments when anger seems easier than mercy. But Jesus' life on earth shattered that lie. He showed that love, patient, enduring, self-sacrificing love, is the only force that truly transforms. The old war taught us how to dominate. The cross taught us how to serve. Think about it. When Jesus stood before Pilate, he had more power in that moment than all the legions of Rome. With a word, he could have summoned armies of angels to scatter his enemies like dust in the wind. But he chose silence. He chose surrender. And in that surrender, he broke the cycle that had enslaved creation since the days of Tiamat. On the cross, as the nails tore through his flesh, he prayed for his executioners. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Luke 23:34. That prayer was not only for the soldiers before him, it was for us, the exiles of Orion, still trapped in the ancient habit of striking before we listen, of hating before we understand. The war in heaven may have ended in the stars, but its battles still play out here on earth, in our politics, in our relationships, even in our thoughts. The enemy is not always across the border or on the other side of the argument. Sometimes, the battlefield is the space between our own ears, and the victory is learning to master the storm inside. And here lies the mystery. Every choice we make is a key. We can forge keys that unlock the gates, keys of forgiveness, humility, compassion. Or we can forge keys that do not fit the lock at all, keys of bitterness, pride, revenge. Which ones we carry will determine whether we leave this prison free or remain here, repeating the same lessons for lifetimes. The Bible tells us in Matthew 16:19 that Jesus gives his followers the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Keys are not just symbols, they are responsibilities. You and I hold in our hands the power to bind or to loose, to shut someone out with our words, or to open the way with our grace. I believe this is why Jesus' message was so simple and yet so costly. Love one another as I have loved you, John 13:34. Because only that love can undo the war. Only that love can close the wound in the soul of creation. Even now the choice is ours. We can live as prisoners, rehearsing the grudges of ages past, or we can step into the role we were created for, not destroyers, but healers. Not warriors of the old rebellion, but ambassadors of reconciliation. And maybe, just maybe, this is the moment in history when that choice matters more than ever. The signs are everywhere. Nations on the brink. Technology racing ahead of wisdom. The earth groaning under the weight of our greed. These are not just random events. They are the shadows of an ancient war flickering against the walls of our present. The Council will not force the door open. The Creator will not drag us into the light against our will. The key remains in our hands. We decide whether to turn it. I wonder, and I invite you to wonder with me, what would happen if even a fraction of us chose differently? If we met hostility with peace, injustice with truth, fear with faith, would the chains of Orion finally fall? Would the earth feel lighter under our feet? Would the sound of that prison gate swinging open echo all the way to the stars? Perhaps the answer is closer than we think. For Jesus has already set the pattern. He entered this prison, walked among the inmates, and showed us how to leave. All that remains is for us to follow. And so, the story that began in the blaze of distant galaxies does not end with their ruin. It ends, if we will it, in the quiet act of forgiveness, the steady walk of faith, the unyielding hope that no soul is beyond redemption. Even the greatest rebel the heavens have ever known. The war was long, the wounds are deep, but the healer has come. And the day is coming when the prophecy will be fulfilled. God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain. Revelation 21:4. Until that day, may we hold the key with both hands, and may we have the courage to turn it. Peace be with you. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ.